Jake Morrison stood in the middle of the giant room. His hands were shaking, but he tried to hide it. Around him sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Some looked like tall trees made of crystal. Others had snake-like bodies that moved in strange ways. A few had 6 eyes and stood twice as tall as any human dot. This was the Galactic Council. Jake had dreamed of this moment for years. He was Earth's first ambassador to the stars. Today, he would ask these aliens to let humans join. Their most important project. The room was huge. The ceiling went up so high that Jake could barely see the top. Strange lights floated in the air, making everything glow with soft colors. The aliens sat in chairs that were built for their weird bodies. Some chairs hung from the ceiling. Others were filled with glowing liquid. Jake wore his best blue suit. It looked so simple compared to the fancy clothes and armor the aliens wore. He felt like a child who had walked into a room full of adults. "Speak, human," said a voice that sounded like breaking glass. The voice came from one of the crystal beings. Her name was Counselor Zara. She was from a planet where everything was made of living crystal. "Tell us why you are here." Jake cleared his throat. "Thank you for letting me speak. I am Jake Morrison. I come from Earth to ask you something important. We want to join the Interstellar Archive project." The room went quiet for a moment, and something terrible happened. The aliens started to laugh. It was not normal laughter. The crystal beings made sounds like wind chimes in a storm. The snake-like aliens hissed in a way that sounded like cruel giggling. The tall 6-eyed ones made deep rumbling sounds that shook the floor. Jake's face turned red. Behind him stood Dr. Lisa Carter. She was Earth's best scientist who studied old things from dead civilizations. She had a small computer in her hands. It contained all of humanity's research and ideas. She looked as embarrassed as Jake felt. "Humans," said a voice that sounded like a snake talking. The voice belonged to High Counselor Vexther. He was the leader of the Korthek people. His body was long and covered in dark scales. "Your people are babies. You have only been alive for a few 1,000 years. What could you possibly know about old civilizations?" More laughter filled the room. Jake wanted to run away, but he stayed where he was. Counselor Zara spoke again. Her crystal body made pretty sounds when she moved. "We have been studying ancient mysteries for millions of years. Our people remember things that happened before your son was born. You humans can barely remember what happened a few hundred years ago." "That is correct," said Elder Thukmar, one of the 6-eyed giants. "The Archive Project is about saving the knowledge of civilizations that died long ago. We work with languages that no one has spoken for millions of years. We study cities that turned to dust before life began on your world." Jake tried to speak, but the aliens kept talking. "Look at them," said another Korthek. "They still fight wars on their own planet. They still hurt their own world with poison and waste. They are not ready for this work." "They probably think they invented writing," said a crystal being. This made all the other crystal beings make that wind chime laughing sound. Lisa Carter stepped forward. She was a small woman with brown hair and kind eyes, but right now her eyes were angry. "We may be young, but we learn fast. We have good ideas. We see things in new ways." "New ways?" Vexter moved closer. His long body slithered across the floor. "Child, we have tried every way possible. We have computers that can think faster than your entire species. We have minds that can remember every detail of 1,000,000 years. We have studied these mysteries longer than your species has existed. What makes you think you can solve puzzles that we cannot?" asked Zara. "What makes you think your tiny civilization has anything to offer us?" Jake felt sick. This was going worse than he had imagined. The aliens were not just saying no. They were making fun of humans. They thought people from Earth were stupid and worthless. But Jake did not give up. He had come too far to quit now. I know we are young. I know we are small. But please give us a chance. Let us try to help with just one project. If we fail, we will go home and never bother you again. The laughter got even louder. Some of the aliens were pointing at Jake now. Others were making sounds that were clearly meant to be insulting. You want us to waste our time? Asked Elder Thokmar. You want us to give precious ancient artifacts to people who might break them by accident. They might try to eat them, said one of the crystal beings. Humans put everything in their mouths like babies. Or they might try to sell them, added a Korthik. Humans love money more than knowledge. Jake's hands became fists. He wanted to shout at them. He wanted to tell them that humans were not stupid or greedy. But he knew that getting angry would only make things worse. Please, he said quietly, just give us one chance, one small test. If we prove we can help, then we can talk about joining the project. If we fail, you never have to see us again. The room became quiet. The aliens looked at each other. They seemed to be talking without using words. Jake could not understand how they did it. Finally, Vexther spoke. You want a test? Very well. But not because we think you can succeed. We will give you a test because it will be funny to watch you fail. What kind of test? Asked Lisa. There is an old puzzle we have been trying to solve for 1,000 years, said Zara. It comes from a dead civilization called the Ashanti. They left behind crystal records that no one can read. Every major species has tried to solve this mystery. All have failed. The Ashanti died 50,000 years ago, added Elder Thokmar. Their language is completely unknown. Their symbols make no sense. Their culture is a complete mystery. If you can solve this puzzle, said Vexther, then maybe we will consider letting you join our project. But when you fail, you must promise to go home and never come back. Jake looked at Lisa. She nodded slowly. We accept, Jake said. The aliens laughed even harder than before. They thought it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Humans were going to try to solve a puzzle that the smartest beings in the galaxy could not figure out. This will be better than watching primitive species try to build spaceships, said one of the crystal beings. I cannot wait to see what silly ideas they come up with, said a Kortha K. Jake, and Lisa left the council chamber with their heads held high. But inside, they both felt scared. They had just promised to do something that might be impossible. The fate of Earth's future in the galaxy now depended on solving a mystery that no one had been able to crack for 1,000 years. As they walked down the long hallway, Jake whispered to Lisa, What have we gotten ourselves into? Lisa looked at her computer full of research. I don't know, but we better figure it out fast. Behind them, the laughter of the aliens still echoed through the halls. 3 months passed before the Galactic Council kept their promise. Jake Morrison got a message on his computer one morning. It was short and mean. The Ashanti Codex is waiting for you on Research Station Alpha 7. Do not waste too much time failing. The galaxy is watching. Jake packed his bags and called his team. Dr. Lisa Carter was already ready to go. She had been studying everything she could find about the Ashanti people for weeks. Dr. Peter Hughes was excited too. He was the best language expert on Earth. Dr. Amy Rodriguez knew more about old human cultures than anyone else alive. Dr. Ben Clark was their computer genius. The 5 humans traveled to Research Station Alpha 7 in their small ship called New Horizon. The station was bigger than most cities on Earth. It floated in space between several alien worlds. Thousands of different species lived and worked there. When they arrived, Jake could see aliens pointing at them and making sounds that seemed like laughter. Word had spread across the galaxy about the stupid humans who thought they could solve the great mystery. Look at the babies, said a tall blue alien as they walked through the station. They think they are smart. I heard they still use primitive computers, said another alien with 4 arms. How can they solve what our quantum minds cannot? Jake ignored them. His team followed him to the research lab they had been given. It was a small room with basic equipment. The aliens had clearly given them the worst space available. In the center of the room sat a clear box. Inside the box were 12 crystal objects. They were dark blue and about the size of human hands. Strange symbols covered every surface. The symbols glowed with a soft light that hurt to look at directly. So this is the Ashanti Codex, said Lisa. She walked around the box slowly. 50,000 years old. The last records of an entire civilization. Peter activated his computer and pointed it at the crystals. The symbols are beautiful. Look how they flow and curve. They are not like any writing system I have ever seen. Amy was taking notes. What do we know about the Ashanti people? Ben was already connecting his equipment to the station's main computer. Not much. They lived on a planet called Ashanti Prime. The planet was destroyed by a natural disaster. These crystals were found in the ruins of their biggest city. The aliens have been studying this for 1,000 years, said Jake. What makes us think we can figure it out? Lisa smiled. Because we are different. We think in ways they do not. 4. The next 2 weeks, the team worked day and night. They tried everything they could think of. They compared the symbols to every known language. They looked for patterns in the way the symbols were arranged. They tried to match them to mathematical formulas. Nothing worked. Other scientists came to watch them fail. Groups of aliens would stand outside their lab window and make jokes. Some brought snacks and watched like they were at a show. The humans have been staring at those crystals for days, said one alien. They must be very confused. I heard one of them was crying yesterday, said another. Poor little primitives. The team tried to ignore the watchers, but it was hard. The pressure was getting to all of them. Jake had trouble sleeping. Lisa stopped eating regular meals. Peter spent hours just staring at the symbols until his eyes hurt. Maybe we should give up, said Amy one evening. Maybe the aliens are right. Maybe we are too young and stupid for this. No, said Ben. There has to be something we are missing. Something the aliens overlooked. Jake looked at his tired team. They all looked ready to quit. What if we are thinking about this wrong? What if these are not just words? What do you mean? Asked Peter. Well, what if the Ashanti did not just write things down like we do? What if they had a different way of keeping information? Lisa looked up from her computer. Different how? Jake thought for a moment. On Earth, before we had writing, how? Did people remember important things? They told stories, said Amy. They sang songs. They made up poems that were easy to remember. Exactly, said Jake. What if the Ashanti did something like that? Ben's eyes got wide. You mean, what if these symbols are not just words? What if they are music or poetry? Peter jumped up from his chair. That's it. That's what we have been missing. Look at how the symbols are arranged. They have rhythm. They have patterns that repeat like music. The team worked with new energy. They started looking at the symbols as if they were musical notes instead of letters. They tried to find the beat and rhythm in the patterns. Slowly, things started to make sense. The symbols were not just random marks. They were arranged in groups that had timing and flow. They were like songs written in stone. It's working, said Lisa. I can see patterns now. The symbols tell stories, but they are meant to be sung or chanted. But what do the stories say? Asked Amy. Ben's computer started making progress. I think I found something. These symbols here repeat a lot. They might be names or titles. Peter was getting excited. And these symbols here are always at the end of sections. They might be like the end of verses in a song. As the days passed, the team made more progress. They began to understand that the Ashanti had created a special way of keeping their history. They had turned their most important knowledge into songs and poems. This made the information easier to remember and harder to forget. But the real surprise came when they started to translate the actual content of the songs. "This is impossible," said Lisa, staring at her computer screen. "This cannot be right." "What is it?" asked Jake. "These songs are not just about the Ashanti people. They are about other species too. Look at this section. It talks about crystal, beings who sing to make their cities grow. That sounds like the Zephyrians." Peter looked at another section. "And this part talks about snake-like people who keep their history in their blood. That sounds like the Korthik." Amy was reading a different part. "This section mentions giant beings with 6 eyes who think deep thoughts about the meaning of life. That has to be the Valders." Ben was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know what this is. The Ashanti were not just keeping their own history. They were keeping the history of everyone they met." "You mean they were like galactic librarians?" asked Jake. "Exactly. They traveled around the galaxy and collected the most important stories and songs from every species they found. Then they turned everything into their own special kind of music so it would never be lost." Lisa was translating more sections. "Look at this. These are creation myths, stories about how different species came to be. And here are ancient laws and rules that species used to follow." "The aliens have been looking for their own lost history," said Peter. "And it was here all along, saved by the Ashanti." Jake realized what this meant. The Ashanti Codex does not just contain the history of one dead civilization. It contains the lost history of dozens of living civilizations. The team worked faster than ever. They translated section after section of ancient songs and stories. They found creation myths that aliens thought were lost forever. They found old laws and customs that had been forgotten for thousands of years. "We have to tell the council," said Lisa. "This is bigger than we thought." "Not yet," said Jake. "We need to be sure. We need to have solid proof before we go back to them." Outside their lab, the alien watchers were getting bored. The humans had been working for weeks without any obvious results. Some aliens stopped coming to watch. Others made jokes about how the humans were too proud to admit they had failed. "They will give up soon," said one alien. "Then we can all laugh at them properly." But inside the lab, the human team was preparing to change everything. They had found something that would shock the entire galaxy. The question was, would anyone believe them? Jake looked at his team. They were tired but excited. They had worked harder than ever before in their lives. "Are we ready to show the galaxy what we found?" "As ready as we will ever be," said Lisa. "Then let's go make some aliens very surprised," said Jake. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Ben Clark was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee. He had been awake for 18 hours straight, staring at patterns on his computer screen. His eyes were red and tired, but something was bothering him about the Ashanti symbols. "Lisa, come look at this," he called out. His voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. Lisa Carter walked over to Ben's workstation. She was also tired. All of them were. They had been working for almost a month now, and the alien watchers outside their lab were getting meaner with their jokes. "What is it?" she asked. Ben pointed at his screen. "I have been running the symbol patterns through every analysis program I have. Look at this. The symbols are not just arranged randomly. They have mathematical relationships." "What kind of relationships?" "Musical ones. The spacing between symbols follows the same patterns as human music, and not just any music. Traditional music, folk songs, lullabies, the kind of music that tells stories." Lisa's eyes got wide. "You mean the Ashanti were actually making music with these symbols? I think so, but here is the really crazy part. The mathematical patterns match specific types of human songs. Songs that parents sing to children. Songs that people sing at important ceremonies. Songs that help people remember things. Peter. Hughes heard them talking and came over. What are you two looking at? Ben thinks the Ashanti symbols are actually music, said Lisa. Peter looked at the screen. That would make sense. In many human cultures, important information was passed down through songs and stories. It made knowledge easier to remember. Amy. Rodriguez joined them. My grandmother used to sing me old songs from Mexico. She said her grandmother taught them to her, and her grandmother's grandmother taught them to her. The songs carried family history going back hundreds of years. Exactly, said Ben. What if the Ashanti did the same thing? What if they turned their important knowledge into songs? Jake Morrison was listening from across the room. But we are not dealing with human songs. We are dealing with alien music. How can we understand it? Maybe the music is not that different, said Amy. Maybe all intelligent species use rhythm and melody to help remember things. Ben was getting excited. I have an idea. What if we try to turn these symbols into actual sounds? What if we make the music they represent? How would we do that? Asked Lisa. We assign each symbol a musical note. Then we play the patterns as songs. If I am right, the songs will sound like they mean something. Peter was nodding. It is worth trying. We have tried everything else. The team spent the next 3 days working on Ben's idea. They gave each Ashanti symbol a musical note. They programmed their computer to play the symbol patterns as songs. At first, the sounds were terrible. They sounded like noise, not music, but slowly they started to find patterns that worked. Some symbols seemed to be like drum beats. Others were like melodies. Some were like the spaces between notes. Play that section again, said Amy, pointing at a group of symbols. Ben played the sounds. This time, it actually sounded like music. Strange music, but music nonetheless. It sounds familiar, said Peter, like something I have heard before. It reminds me of church hymns, said Lisa. You know, the old songs that tell religious stories. Amy was thinking hard. Or like the epic poems that ancient Greeks used to recite. Long stories told in verse, so they would be easier to remember. Jake had been quiet, but now he spoke up. What if that is exactly what these are? What if the Ashanti turned their most important knowledge into hymns and epic poems? But whose knowledge? Asked Ben. Lisa was looking at the translated sections. They had already worked on. Remember what we found before? The Ashanti were collecting stories from other species. What if they turned all those stories into songs? You mean they were like traveling musicians? Asked Peter. Going from planet to planet, learning songs and stories from different species? More than that, said Amy. What if they were like the keepers of galactic memory? They collected the most important cultural knowledge from every species they met and turned it into songs so it would never be lost. Ben played another section of symbols. This time, the music was beautiful. It sounded sad and important, like a song about something that had been lost. Play it again, said Lisa. But slower this time. As the music played, Lisa started to understand something. I think this section is about the Zephyrians, the crystal beings. Listen to how the notes ring and echo. That is how their voices sound. Peter was getting excited. And this section here sounds like it has a beat that matches how the Korthik move. You know, that slithering rhythm they have. Amy was reading her notes. The Zephyrians told us that their ancient crystal songs were lost thousands of years ago. What if they are not lost? What if they are right here, preserved in the Ashanti Codex? The Korthik also mentioned lost blood oaths, said Jake, the original promises that founded their civilization. Ben was playing more sections of the Codex. And the Valdres talked about their first thoughts, the philosophical foundations of their species. Lisa was translating as fast as she could. This is incredible. The Ashanti were not just keeping their own history. They were keeping the sacred knowledge of dozens of species, things that those species thought were lost forever. But why? Asked Jake. Why would the Ashanti do this? Amy smiled. Because they understood something important. They knew that knowledge is precious. They knew that when a species loses its history, it loses part of its soul. Peter was reading over Lisa's shoulder. Look at this section. It is like instructions. It says that the Ashanti made it their mission to find and preserve the cultural treasures of every species they encountered. They were galactic librarians, said Ben. But instead of books, they used songs. Lisa was translating faster now. This section talks about how they learned the sacred creation songs of the Zephyrians. And here, it describes how they were taught the original blood oaths of the Korthic ancestors. The Valdres are mentioned here too, said Jake. It says the Ashanti spent years learning the first thoughts of the Valdres elders. Amy was amazed. The Ashanti created a universal archive of cultural knowledge. They saved the most important stories and songs from across the galaxy. And they did it using the same methods that humans have always used, said Peter. Songs and stories that could be passed down from generation to generation. Ben played another section. This is beautiful. It sounds like a lullaby, but it is actually a creation myth. The story of how the Zephyrians believe their species came to be. Lisa was crying now. Do you realize what this means? The species that are laughing at us outside have been looking for their own lost heritage for thousands of years. And it has been here all along, preserved by a species that understood the value of cultural memory. The Ashanti were like us, said Amy. They were collectors of stories. They understood that knowledge is not just information, it is identity. Jake looked at his team. They were all excited and tired and amazed. We have to tell the council. We have to show them what we found. Are we sure we are right? Asked Peter. Lisa looked at her computer screen full of translations. I am sure. The Ashanti Codex contains the lost cultural treasures of half the galaxy. Creation myths, founding philosophies, sacred songs, original laws. Things that these species have been mourning for thousands of years. Ben was still playing sections of the Codex. Each one sounded different, but all of them sounded important. The aliens are going to be shocked. They are going to be more than shocked, said Jake. They are going to be grateful. We are not just solving a mystery. We are giving them back their souls. Amy was smiling. And we are doing it using the most human skill of all, the ability to recognize a good story when we hear one. Outside their lab, the alien watchers were still making jokes. They had no idea that the humans inside had just made the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history. Should we tell them now? Asked Lisa. Jake looked at his team. They had worked harder than ever before. They had solved a mystery that had stumped the galaxy for 1,000 years. And they had done it by being human. Yes, he said. Let's go give the galaxy back its history. The message Jake Morrison sent to Earth was simple but shocking. We solved it. The Ashanti Codex is decoded. Sending translations now. Prepare for galaxy-wide response. Within hours, the first translated section reached the Galactic Council. It was a crystal song of the Zephyrians, one of their most sacred creation hymns. The song told the story of how their species was born from the heart of a dying star, and how they learned to sing their cities into existence. Counselor Zara received the translation in her crystal chamber. When she read it, she made a sound that had never been heard before. It was the sound of a crystal being crying. The song was perfect. Every word was exactly as her ancestors had sung it 30,000 years ago. The rhythm was right. The melody was right. Even the spiritual meaning was preserved exactly as it had been passed down through generations before being lost. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This song has been lost for longer than most species have existed. How could the humans know it?" But the evidence was right in front of her. The humans had not just found the song. They had found hundreds of crystal songs. The entire foundation of Zephyrian spiritual culture was preserved in the Ashanti Codex. At the same time, High Counselor Vexthor of the Korthik was reading another section. It contained the original blood oaths of his people. These were the sacred promises that the first Korthik leaders had made to each other when they formed their civilization. Vexthor's long body trembled as he read. The blood oaths contained the names of ancestors whose names had been forgotten for 50,000 years. They contained the original laws that had guided his people before wars and disasters had destroyed their early records. "The names of the first fathers," he said in amazement. "The original promises that made us one people. I thought these were just legends." The blood oaths were written in the old language, the pure language that the Korthik had spoken before they mixed with other species. Many of the words had been lost, but here they were, preserved perfectly in the Ashanti songs. Elder Thokmar of the Valdris was studying a third section. It contained the first thoughts of the Valdris philosophers. These were the original ideas that had shaped how the Valdris understood reality, consciousness, and the meaning of existence. The six-eyed giant sat in his meditation chamber, reading thoughts that had been written by the greatest minds of his species, thoughts that had been lost when the great libraries were destroyed in the War of Silence. "The original contemplations," he said slowly, "the foundation of all Valdris philosophy. My people have been trying to reconstruct these ideas for millions of years, but the Ashanti had not just saved the words. They had saved the context. They had saved the stories of how these ideas were developed. They had saved the debates between the ancient philosophers. They had saved the complete intellectual heritage of the Valdris species." Back on Research Station Alpha 7, Jake and his team were working around the clock. More and more sections of the Ashanti Codex were being translated. Each section revealed new treasures. "Look at this," said Lisa, pointing at her screen. "This section contains the original treaty between the Korthik and the Zephyrians, the one that established the first galactic trade routes." Peter was reading another section. "And this one has the founding myths of the Drexel Confederation, species that have been part of the Council for thousands of years." Amy had found something else. The Ashanti documented first contact events. They recorded what happened when different species met for the first time. This is living history. Ben was amazed by the complexity of what they were finding. The Ashanti were not just collectors. They were anthropologists. They studied how different species lived and thought and dreamed. Jake was reading a section that explained the Ashanti's methods. They spent generations learning from each species they encountered. They lived with them. They learned their languages. They participated in their ceremonies. And then they translated everything into their own musical language, said Lisa. They created a universal archive that could preserve the cultural knowledge of any species. The implications were staggering. The Ashanti Codex was not just a collection of old songs. It was a complete library of galactic civilization. It contained the lost heritage of dozens of species, creation myths, founding philosophies, sacred laws, historical records, and spiritual traditions. We have to be careful about how we release this information, said Jake. Some of these species have been fighting each other for thousands of years. If they all find out that their original cultures were actually connected, it could change everything, said Amy. It could bring peace, or it could start wars. Peter was reading a section about the Ashanti themselves. The Ashanti knew this might happen. They left instructions about how their archive should be used. They said it should only be shared with species that were ready to learn from the past. Lisa looked up from her computer. What do you think that means? I think it means we have to be wise about this, said Jake. We cannot just dump all this information on the galaxy at once. We have to think about the consequences. Ben was still. Finding new sections. There is so much here. The Ashanti documented hundreds of species. Some of them are still alive. Some of them are extinct. Some of them might not even know that their history was saved. Amy was getting emotional. Do you realize what the Ashanti did? They sacrificed everything to save the cultural heritage of the galaxy. They turned their entire civilization into a library. And when their planet was destroyed, they made sure their archive would survive, said Peter. They put it in crystal form, so it would last forever. Jake was thinking about the bigger picture. The species that are laughing at us outside do not know what we have found. They think we are failing. They have no idea that we are about to give them back their souls. Lisa was reading the final sections of the Codex. The Ashanti left a message for whoever would eventually decode their archive. They said that the species that could understand their methods would be the ones ready to carry on their work. What does that mean? Asked Ben. It means they were looking for successors, said Amy. They were looking for another species that understood the value of cultural preservation. Peter was smiling. They were looking for us. They were looking for humans. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You mean this was all planned? The Ashanti knew that someday a species like us would come along? Not planned, said Lisa, but hoped for. The Ashanti believed that there would always be species that cared about stories and songs and cultural memory. They believed that knowledge would always find a way to survive. Ben was looking at the final section of the Codex. There is one more thing. The Ashanti left detailed instructions about how to continue their work. They created a manual for preserving cultural knowledge across the galaxy. They want us to become the new keepers of galactic memory, said Amy. Jake looked at his team. They had started this project hoping to solve a simple puzzle. Instead, they had discovered that they were meant to become the guardians of galactic civilization. Are we ready for that responsibility? He asked. Lisa smiled. We are humans. We have been telling stories and preserving knowledge for thousands of years. This is what we do. Peter nodded. And we have proven that we can do it better than anyone else in the galaxy. Ben was already making plans. We need to contact Earth. We need to prepare for what comes next. Amy was looking out the window at the alien watchers. They are not going to be laughing much longer. Jake took a deep breath. Then let's go change the galaxy. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most important meeting in the history of the galaxy. Representatives from every major species had come. The crystal beings of Zephyria had sent their high singers. The Korthic had brought their blood keepers. The Valders had awakened their oldest contemplators. Jake Morrison stood in the same spot where he had been laughed at 3 months ago. But this time, the room was completely silent. Every alien eye was focused on him and his team. Behind Jake, Dr. Lisa Carter held a data pad containing the complete translation of the Ashanti Codex. Dr. Peter Hughes had prepared musical recordings of the ancient songs. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had written cultural analysis reports. Dr. Ben Clark had organized everything into a presentation that would change galactic history. Honored Council, Jake began, his voice strong and clear. 3 months ago, you gave us a test. You wanted to see if humans could solve the mystery of the Ashanti Codex. You expected us to fail. Many of you came to watch us fail for your entertainment. Jake paused and looked around the room. The aliens were listening carefully now. No one was laughing. We did not fail. We solved your mystery. But what we found was bigger than any of us imagined. Lisa stepped forward and activated her datapad. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed the Ashanti, symbols glowing softly in the air. The Ashanti Codex is not just the history of one dead civilization, Lisa said. It is a universal archive. It contains the lost cultural treasures of dozens of living civilizations. A sound like breaking glass came from the Zephyrian section. Counselor Zara was trying to speak, but no words came out. The crystal songs of your ancestors are here, Lisa continued, looking at the Zephyrians. All of them. Every sacred hymn that you thought was lost forever. Peter activated his computer. The sound of ancient Zephyrian crystal songs filled the chamber. The music was beautiful and haunting. It sounded like wind chimes made of starlight. The Zephyrian delegates began to glow brighter. Some of them were making sounds that might have been crying. Others were singing along with the ancient melodies, remembering words they had not heard for 30,000 years. Impossible, whispered Counselor Zara. These songs died with our ancestors. How could aliens know them? Because the Ashanti learned them from your ancestors, said Amy. They lived with the ancient Zephyrians. They participated in your ceremonies. They learned your songs so they could preserve them forever. Jake turned to the Korthik section. High Counselor Vexther was coiled tightly, his scaled body tense with emotion. The original blood oaths of your people are also preserved, Jake said. The sacred promises that founded your civilization, the names of your first fathers. They, pure language of your ancestors. Ben played a recording of the ancient Korthik oaths. The words were spoken in the old tongue, with the rhythm and power of sacred vows. The language was pure and strong, untouched by thousands of years of change. Vexther-ji. Longbody began to tremble. The names, he hissed softly. I can hear the names of the first fathers. We thought they were lost in the time of forgetting. They were not lost, said Lisa. They were saved. The Ashanti made sure that your heritage would survive. Jake turned to the Valdris section. Elder Thokmar and his fellow contemplators were sitting perfectly still, their 6 eyes wide with amazement. The first thoughts of your ancient philosophers are here too, Jake said. The original ideas that shaped your understanding of existence, the foundation of all Valdris wisdom. Amy began to read from the translated texts. She spoke the ancient, Valdris concepts in their original form, with all their complexity and beauty intact. The ideas were profound and deep, touching on questions that the Valdris had been exploring for millions of years. Elder Thokmar rose slowly to his feet. His massive form towered over everyone in the chamber. The original contemplations, he said in a voice filled with wonder. The thoughts we have been trying to remember for eons. How did you find them? We did not find them, said Peter. The Ashanti found them. They spent generations learning from your ancestors. They preserved your intellectual heritage in their songs. Jake looked around the chamber. Representatives from dozens of other species were leaning forward, eager to know if their own lost heritage had been preserved as well. The Ashanti did not stop with these 3 species, Jake said. They traveled across the galaxy for thousands of years. They collected the cultural treasures of every civilization they encountered. Creation myths, founding laws, sacred ceremonies, historical records. All of it is here. Lisa activated more sections of the holographic display. Names and symbols from dozens of species appeared in the air. Each one represented cultural knowledge that had been thought lost forever. The founding treaties of the galactic trade routes, she said. The original peace accords between warring species. The creation myths of extinct civilizations. The philosophical works of ancient scholars. The Ashanti saved it all. Amy stepped forward. But they did more than just collect this knowledge. They understood what it meant. They knew that when a species loses its cultural heritage, it loses part of its identity. The Ashanti turned their entire civilization into a library, said Ben. They sacrificed their own development to become the keepers of galactic memory. Peter was reading from his notes. They left detailed records of their methods. They explained how they learned to understand different species, how they participated in alien cultures, how they translated everything into their universal song language. Jake felt the weight of the moment. The entire galaxy was listening to him now. The Ashanti also left a message for whoever would eventually decode their archive. They said that the species capable of understanding their methods would be ready to carry on their work. What does that mean? Asked Counselor Zara. Her crystal form was still glowing with emotion. It means they were looking for successors, said Amy. They were looking for another species that would value cultural preservation above everything else. Vexter spoke up. You are saying that they chose humans for this role? Not chose, said Jake. But they hoped that someday a species like us would come along. A species that still remembered the importance of stories and songs and cultural memory. Elder Thokmar was thinking deeply. You solved this mystery because you understand what the Ashanti understood. You know that knowledge is not just information. It is the soul of a civilization. Jake nodded. We may be young compared to your species, but we still carry our history in our voices. We still tell stories to our children. We still sing songs that connect us to our past. And that is why you could hear the music in the Ashanti symbols, said Counselor Zara. Because you still make music that carries meaning. Lisa smiled. Every human culture has done this. We turn important knowledge into songs and stories, so it will not be forgotten. The Ashanti did the same thing, but on a galactic scale. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Elder Thokmar spoke. 3 months ago, we laughed at your youth. We mocked your lack of ancient wisdom. But you have given us back our souls. You have returned to us the heritage we thought was lost forever. Vexter uncoiled his long body. The blood oaths you have restored contain the true foundation of Korthic society. They will help us remember who we really are. Counselor Zara's crystal form was singing softly. The crystal songs will bring new life to our people. Our young ones will learn the ancient ways again. Jake looked around the chamber. Every alien face showed wonder and gratitude. The species that had mocked humanity now understood what humans could offer. We request permission to continue the Ashanti's work, Jake said. We want to join the Interstellar Archive Project, not just as members, but as the new keepers of galactic cultural memory. You want to become the successors to the Ashanti? Asked Elder Thokmar. We want to make sure that no species ever loses its heritage again, said Lisa. We want to preserve the stories and songs and wisdom of every civilization in the galaxy. Amy added, and we want to share what we learn. Cultural knowledge belongs to everyone. Ben was already making plans. We can create new methods for preserving cultural information. We can combine human storytelling techniques with alien technology. Peter smiled. We can make sure that the galaxy never forgets its own history again. The vote was unanimous. Every species in the Council agreed to accept humanity into the Archive Project. But more than that, they agreed to let humans lead the effort to preserve galactic cultural heritage. As the session ended, Jake felt overwhelmed by what had happened. 3 months ago, the galaxy had laughed at humanity's youth and inexperience. Now they were asking humans to become the guardians of galactic civilization. Outside the chamber, news of the discovery was spreading across the galaxy. Species that had lost touch with their own heritage were learning that their cultural treasures had been preserved. Wars that had been fought over forgotten disagreements were ending as species rediscovered their common origins. The galaxy had laughed at the young species from Earth, but now they sang hymns of gratitude for the perspective that only the young could bring. Humanity had shown them that in the rush toward the future, the past must never be forgotten. Jake stood with his team in the observation deck of Research Station Alpha 7. Through the windows, they could see ships from dozens of species.